to you would be, which Canaanite tribe do you descend from?
I have no clue. What Canaanite tribe
Well,
do
then
you descend from?
Israelites.
Oh, nice.
Well, but if you're saying you descend from the Canaanites, so the Canaanites weren't a people, right? There was
Yeah,
no,
they were people that occupied a
no,
land. They were,
no.
yes.
The Canaanites were, no, no. I'm going to teach you something. And whether you want to believe me or not is fine, but it's all verified by history. I've done extensive studies on this subject. The
Mm-hmm.
Canaanites were a collection of tribes. They were different tribes called the Canaanites because they lived in the land of Canaan. But there were
Exactly.
no
Yeah.
Canaanites. There were Hivites, Perizzites, Jebusites, Amorites, Amalekites, Israelites, Philistines for a period of time, Phoenicians. These were all different Canaanite tribes. Okay.
Mhm.
And so if you say you're a Canaanite, then you should be able to know which tribe you're from.
No, I don't say I'm a Canaanite. I say I'm a
You
Palestinian. I'm just
No,
telling
but
you
you
we are the
said the
descendants
Palestinians were
of
there when the
Canaanite.
Canaanites were there.
Yes.
So
Well,
which
yes.
tribe do the Palestinians descend
We
from?
didn't
That's all
just
I'm asking.
come from nowhere. I don't know. I don't know how this is a very hard subject. Like we didn't just come out of nowhere, right?
Yes, you're right. I agree with that.
Yeah.
100%. They didn't come out of nowhere. They
So
came from
just like
the
how,
Arabian Peninsula.
Can I ask you a question, Lena? Can I ask you a question? When you take a DNA test, where does have you ever if you've ever taken one, where does the DNA go back to? Because my DNA goes back all the way back to like ancient Israel. Does your DNA go back to all the way back to ancient Canaan? I guess that's what it's
mm,
called. Is it called Canaan?
no,
Yes.
go back to
Yes.
ancient Canaan. I don't think it would go back to Palestine,
There
Israel.
was no Palestine.
No, that's what it would say on a DNA
There,
test. It would be those
oh,
countries.
So Lena,
No,
you're telling me
the
what?
So it
Palestinians.
would tell me that I go back to Palestine, Lebanon. If I took one, I haven't taken one, but
Yeah, but that's
sure,
not a people. Those are country. Those are national identities. There's no.
exactly.
there were
But
elite.
the national identity isn't measurable by
Well, you're
DNA.
saying
So you're
Palestine.
telling me, Lena, if you took a DNA test tomorrow, it would show that your DNA goes back to the Palestinian, like to the
Yeah.
Palestinian area.
Yes, I'm very confident
Wait,
that
can
it
I?
would. Like,
But you can't tell
I'm
me
confident
which tribe.
go back
You're
to
saying
like Europe, though. I'm very
you're
confident.
saying you took
What
a.
what what did you say, Lena? What did you say
I'm
about my
I'm conf-
DNA?
I'm confident mine would go back to Palestine in the Middle Eastern region, but I feel like yours would probably go back to some European countries as well.
I'm sorry to say this, Lena, but I already took a DNA test.
Oh,
So
Is
you
that
didn't
How
take
did
one,
Jews
but
get
you're
to Europe,
confident about
Lena?
yours, and you're telling me about my DNA test. And you're
wait?
How
actually
did
being,
Jews
hold
get
on,
to
I want to
Europe?
answer her, Hebrew Hammer. You're actually being very anti-Semitic
me?
because, yeah, you're trying to say that like all Ashkenazi Jews are European, and it's actually an anti-Semitic trope. When
That's not.
actually Ashkenazi Jews
Wait, wait,
are
wait.
actually originally from Europe, from Israel. We just got when we were exiled from Israel, we just ended up in Europe, just like Mizrahi
Yeah,
and Sephardic Jews ended up in Spain and North Africa and the Middle East. And I don't understand when it's a brown skinned Jew, you accept that they're originally from Israel just because they ended up in the Middle East and Spain and North Africa. But when it's a white passing Jew, it's just like, oh, they're really from Europe. It sounds like you're racist against white people. Go
I'm
Can
ahead,
I?
not racist
Hebrew Hammer.
against white people, but I'm just telling you, just like how he said, "Oh, you're not Canaanite, you're Arab." I'm telling you, I'm not Canaanite. I wouldn't identify as Canaanite. But just like how I was a Canaanite and became a Arab, you went to Europe and you mixed in with Europeans, and you probably became part of your DNA is European. It's not hard.
Okay, but it's not okay.
Can I
Okay.
speak? Wait, can I speak? I've been waiting such a long
Hold
time.
on, let Hebrew Hammer
No,
return.
no, let her go
Respond.
first. Let her go
Let
first,
Hebrew
Andrea.
Hammer
Let her go first.
respond because I
Let her
don't
go
think
first. Let
part
her
of
go
my
first.
DNA. Honestly,
Let
I
her
want
go
Hebrew
first.
Hammer to answer this. I have a question
Is
about this. Hebrew Hammer knows more about this. Okay, so Hebrew Hammer is part of my DNA European because I believe that my DNA is not European. Now
you
my
can't
Hebrew, my
believe?
DNA, besides the my half of my DNA, which is German, but I have
There you go.
50%
You just
Ashkenazi Jewish DNA. So I believe that is not European DNA. I believe that goes back to Israel. So I want Hebrew, and I want nobody to interrupt him. I want Hebrew Hammer to explain this.
So you have to understand that the DNA testing that's available, like 23andMe and Ancestry.com, they only go back 5 generations, which is about
Mhm.
100 to 120 years, right? To accurately know whether or not you have Canaanite DNA, your DNA would have to be compared to human remains from the Canaanite period. Now, there has been extensive genetic testing of Canaanite remains that have been found. And what's been found is 90% of Jews worldwide, Ashkenazi and Mizrahi and Sephardic, can be traced, genetically speaking, to the Levant, to Judea. Okay. Palestinians, they've done genetics testing on this. Less than 3% of Palestinians can trace their DNA to the Canaanites, and they trace their DNA through the Phoenician tribe. And the Phoenicians left the land of Canaan and settled in Lebanon, and then migrated south. So it's a matter of indigeneity, and Palestinians are not indigenous to the land, whereas Jews are. So less than 3% of Palestinians can actually link their DNA, trace their DNA to the Levant. All the other Palestinians can trace their lineage to the Arabian Peninsula, because that's where Arabs come from. Now, when we're talking about indigeneity, when we're talking about what is the criteria for indigenous status, the United Nations, along with indigenous people and academics and scholars, came up with a six-point list of criteria that needs to be met to be considered indigenous to a land. And DNA is not one of them. And the reason is DNA testing is young, right? It's 20 years old. Prior to 20 years ago, we had no ability to genetically test individuals to find out where their heritage came from. It's a very new, amazing medical advancement. But in 1995, if you wanted to know where you were from, there was no genetic test available to the public where you were able to do so. And that's why we use history and archaeology to determine who is indigenous and who is not. Now, when you said, Lena, that you guys were Arabized, that's true. And you and I agree on that. You guys were Arabized by the Arabs from the Arabian Peninsula that conquered
Just like the
region.
entire Middle East. Yeah. We were
Right,
Arabized.
exactly.
Yeah.
That means you're not indigenous. Because
That
one of the
means we're not
criteria for
indigenous, but
indigenous.
okay.
Hebrew Hammer, I want to say I disagree with Hebrew Hammer. I think the Palestinians, they're not like, they don't have like thousands of years of indigenous and culture and language and
native.
religion. Like, hold on,
They're
let me
native,
finish.
not
Let me
indigenous.
finish. Let me
There's a
finish.
difference.
Okay, they don't have
They're
like
native.
thousands of, hold on, let me just finish. Let me land my
Okay.
plane, then Hebrew Hammer can
Let
go
her
on.
speak.
They don't have like thousands of years like the Jews do, like culture, religion, all these different things like the Jews do. But I do believe that the Palestinians have, maybe indigenous is not the right word, but I like the word
Native.
indigenous. I feel comfortable with it. I believe that the Palestinians are indigenous to the land of Israel, Palestine. And if they feel comfortable with that word, I'll use the word indigenous, because I believe they have rights to the land. I believe they've been there a long time. I believe they should have land. And I feel comfortable with saying the word indigenous.
I agree with everything you said except the indigenous part. They're native to the land. Native meaning, where were you born? Like, for example, I am native. Andrea, you and I are native to the United States of America. That's where we are native.
And I am
Are
born.
we? Wait, hang
And
on.
I
We
am
are indigenous,
Palestinian.
Andrea. You and I are indigenous to the kingdom of Judea. Now, the
And I am
You guys are
Palestinians have
both
been there. Hold on, I'm almost done. The Palestinians have been there for a while, but they're not indigenous, not according to the worldwide accepted definition of indigenous. Now, one of the criteria for indigenous is historical continuity with pre-settler or pre-colonial times. The Israelites have historical continuity from the Israelites all the way to the Jews. Same land, same God, same religion, same language that we had 3,500 years ago. Once the population there was Arabized, according to the worldwide accepted definition today, they lost their indigenous status. I didn't make up these rules. These were the criteria set forth by the United Nations in conjunction with indigenous people all over the world.
Okay,
And this
Hebrew
is the
Hammer,
worldwide accepted
I hear
criteria.
you. I hear you. Let one of the
That's it. I'm
Palestinians
done.
respond. One of you
Abraham,
guys
do
respond.
you mind if I speak? I've been trying to get a word in for a while.
I'm done.
Okay. I just want to say, you guys are saying DNA tests and stuff like this. Oh, actually, no. I actually have a question. What does the Torah say about ownership of land? Can you guys answer that?
Don't care.
Okay,
I mean,
Abram,
I'm not. Are you trying to say that thing that like the Nateri Karta says about Jews shouldn't have a state of Israel? Let me tell you something about that. Okay, you know how like Islamophobes will bring up like a some fringe
Where are you
Islamic
saying
hold on, let me finish,
Islamophobes?
let me finish. Let me lay my plane, then you guys can respond. How, an Islamophobe will bring up like some random fringe sheikh will say like some really crazy fatwa like Muslims can beat their wives or something, and then people will run with it and be like, oh, look what the Muslim said. Okay, that's an example of this, where someone will bring up something that the Tarot Carta said and be like, look, all Jews believe this. Listen, the Tarot Carta is a fringe Jewish group that 99.9% of the Jews do not hold by what they say. Okay. So don't quote what the Neteric Carta says about Israel and be like, that's Judaism. That's all I have to say about that.
My case for Israel isn't a religious case; it's a historical case. You've noticed I didn't bring up Torah at all in making the case for the Jewish indigenous status
Wait,
of
can
Israel.
I just
I don't use Torah.
we also wait, can I speak? We believe in the Torah. Wait, can I speak?
Wait, we can't hear you, Fatima.
Fatima, you don't believe in the
Go
Torah.
ahead.
You believe that the Torah we have today is corrupted. You believe that a Torah was given to Moses and that Torah no longer exists. You believe the Torah we have today is not the true Torah. So you don't believe in our Torah. We believe we have the original Torah. So you have a different narrative than us. So don't say you believe in the Torah because you don't believe in the Torah. You believe in some magical Torah that you say existed once upon a time.
The case for Israel is not a religious one. It's a historical one. I'm not talking religion because religion is a matter of faith and not fact. It's a matter of belief and not provable science. So
Okay, I have
I
a
don't
question.
take the religious argument. Go ahead. Sorry.
And Hebrew Hammer is not religious anyways. Go ahead, Lena.
That's true.
Okay, wait. Can I ask a question about how long did you guys always bring up the kingdom of Judea? How long did that last for, that kingdom?
Well, the first kingdom was the first kingdom was the kingdom. I mean, I don't know specific dates. I'm not that kind of historian, but the first there was the kingdom of Israel. It lasted for a few hundred years until, like I said, there was a split because a king died and there was a disagreement about who the next king should be. So 2 of the 12 tribes split off and formed their own kingdom in the south called the Kingdom of Judah. So there was the Kingdom of Israel to the north and the Kingdom of Judah to the south. And the Kingdom of Israel had Shechem and Nablus and all the cities now that are in Judea and Samaria. They're all Jewish cities: Nablus, Nazareth, you name it. The south had Jerusalem and the southern part of what is today Israel. The Kingdom of Israel was conquered by the Assyrians, so that it disappeared. The Kingdom of Judah became the Kingdom of Judea. We're talking about all these different kingdoms that were for the Israelites and Jews lasted over a period of roughly 1,300 years, essentially.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not find that
From like
number.
1200 BCE until the Roman conquest in 70 AD, at which point the Kingdom of Judea was vanquished, conquered, eliminated from history. And then after the revolt by Bar Kokhba, again, this is historical, not religious. The Bar Kokhba revolt of 135 AD, the Romans, as a way to really stick it to the Jews, renamed Judea Syria Palestina. That's Latin, not Arabic. And Palestina was a derivative of the Greek word Philistia. Philistia was named as such by the Philistines, who were Greek, and they lived in what is today Gaza. And Philistia actually comes from Hebrew, the Hebrew word pleshet, which means invaders. The Greeks and then later the Romans wanted the Jews to know that they had lost, and so they gave the name invaders as a way to rub it in the face of the Jews. So anytime they had to say the land, the Jews knew they were conquered. Palestina is not an Arabic word. There's no P in Arabic, as I'm sure you know. That's why it's called Philistine in Arabic. So the name Palestine itself is a Latin / Greek / Hebrew word, and it's a colonial term. It was
Doesn't
named as such by
Palestine
the
mean Holy
colonizers.
Land?
I'm
Doesn't
sorry?
Palestine mean Holy Land?
There is no P in Arabic. It's Philistine.
Okay,
Because
doesn't Palestine.
Palestine doesn't mean Holy Land. Of course not. The Romans would never call Israel a Holy Land. That's a joke. She thinks Palestine means Holy Land.
Palestine.
No, I mean I don't know. I know there's no P in Arabic, so I know Palestine
No,
is
no, no,
not.
no. Hebrew Hammer. She thinks the Romans named Israel Holy Land, Palestine. That the Latin, Greek, Hebrew word that they
Oh,
picked means
I
Holy
see.
Land. That the definition of the
No, it
word
means
Palestine
invaders.
means Holy Land.
No, it means invaders. It means invaders.
Palestine doesn't mean invaders.
It does in Latin, and Philistia means invaders in Greek.
All right, I actually don't know what it means. I'm gonna Google this. I have no clue.
Cool.
No, but it's funny that you guys would think the Romans who
Google the
didn't like the
etymology.
land and didn't like the Jews would name the land Holy Land. Like that's funny. It's kind of funny actually.
Google the etymology of Palestine, and you'll come up with the Google result, which will tell you Palestina was Latin, Philistia was Greek, and it comes from Pleshet, which is Hebrew.
Okay, I have a question. So is
Palestine.
Eber or whatever? Sorry, I don't know your name. Is your stance on this that Palestine is never a country and like we're not Palestinian and there's no Palestine type of thing?
No. My position is there was never an independent sovereign nation called Palestine. There was never a country called Palestine.
Why does that matter? Wait, hang on. Why does that matter?
You didn't let me finish.
No,
I'll explain
I
my
you
position.
talked for way too long, and you just like.
But she asked me a question.
But you talked
Don't
for way
ask a
too long.
question. Make a statement then. You asked me a question. Don't
Go-
ask
okay,
a
wait,
question if you don't want the
continue.
answer.
An essay.
Wait, go ahead, continue. I want to hear it. Go ahead, continue.
Okay. There was never an independent nation or entity called Palestine run by Arabs. The region at various points in history was called Palestine. The idea of a Palestinian national movement, the idea of creating a state of Palestine didn't start until 1964 with Yasser Arafat, who, by the way, was Egyptian, who started the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Prior to the start of the PLO, and especially before 1948, if you referred to a Palestinian, quote unquote, in the region, you meant the Jews. The Arabs did not self-identify as Palestinians until 1964. That's why the Palestine Post became the Jerusalem Post. Palestine Airways became El Al Airways. The Palestine Philharmonic became the Palestine national soccer team was Maccabi Tel Aviv, filled with Jews. The Arabs self-identified as Arabs, not as Palestinians, until 1964. That being said, I do believe there should be an independent state of Palestine living next door to the independent state of Israel, so long as it can be done so in peace.
Okay, so
I advocate for a two-state solution.
Okay, so I just want to say there was never an Israel before 1948, correct?
There was the Kingdom of Israel in 1200 BCE.
But there was never a country. There was never a state. There was nothing. There was never anything on a map that said Israel, right? There was never.
Right. Unless you go back to the Kingdom of Israel, correct?
We're just using your logic here. That's it.
I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying unless you go back to the Kingdom of Israel, you are correct. There was no country named Israel.
Yep.
The reason there was no country named Israel is because at various times over the 3,000 years,
and you know,
okay,
at various times over the 3,000 years that the Kingdom of Israel was conquered, the land was occupied by foreign empires.
Can I finish?
The Romans.
Can I finish? Wait, do you
Turks,
mind just holding on a
Babylonians.
moment?
Okay, Hebrew Hammer. Let her with the next question.
I'm done.
Go ahead.
I'm done.
So we agreed that there was no Israel before 1948. Before
Hold on, Fatima. Let me just say something. Because I haven't talked in a while.
Let me finish.
Hold on, Fatima. I have not talked. Fatima. Fatima, I'm going to disconnect you. I have not talked.
Disconnect me. You're not even letting me speak.
Fatima, I have let you ask a lot of questions, and I just want to say 2 sentences, and it's my life, and I have not talked at all in a long time. I just want to say 1 sentence. You have to understand, the name wasn't Israel. It wasn't a state of Israel, but the land of Judea, the kingdom of Judea, was basically another word for like a state of Israel, except it's not like the modern state of Israel. It was a Jewish state, okay, which is like the state of Israel today, except run differently. So it's the same.
そう